Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm really happy to have you guys here. So today's video is going to be really interesting. We are going to be building a Laravel 11 project from scratch, and trust me, this is going to be really easy if you're a beginner, and I'm going through it like step by step. Here I have opened the documentation of Laravel 11 and you can go through it. The concepts are pretty basic and very understandable. So to begin with, I think that we need to have all the necessary dependencies installed in our system. The first thing that you guys need to install Composer. You can go to the website and download the Composer. Secondly, we need to have XAMPP server installed, so you guys can do that. And third, we need to have a PHP latest version installed in our system, or whatever, if there is already there in your system. So make sure that you have all the required dependencies installed in your system, and then we can go ahead with creating our project. Alright, so I'm going to firstly pull up an terminal, and you guys can be in any folder of your choosing. Now here, if you guys have installed the Composer already, so you can just type the command Composer and create project. Now Laravel /Laravel, and then you guys can name your project anything that you want. Like currently I want to name it like Laravel auth. Alright, and I'm going to press enter. So this is probably going to take some time. It will install some dependencies, and eventually the project is going to get installed in our system. Let's wait for a while. Alright, now as you can see that the project is already installed. I'm going to cd into that folder which was Laravel auth. Alright, now I'm just going to open that project in VS Code, and the folder structure looks something like that. You don't have to worry about this very much to begin with, but in order to start the app you have to run the command php artisan serve. Alright, no, I'm sorry, it's serve. Alright, so you can see that the project has already started on localhost 8000. So you can just directly go to your browser, open a new tab, and just open like localhost 8000. Alright, now as you can clearly see that the localhost 8000 is already running on your browser device. So I feel that this initial setup was really easy, and now we can begin with the actual like API's development. So now that our setup is done and everything is installed in our system, I want to go through the folder structure once. So let's go inside this public folder, and then there we have this index.php file. So one thing we need to remember is that this index.php file inside the public folder is the entry point of every single request coming to this project. So every single request, whether it's post, put, get, or whatever it is, it's gonna come to this file in the beginning, and then after that you can see that it has been redirected to this handle request method inside the bootstrap folder app.php. Alright, so secondly, this any request that comes to this project or app goes to this file. Alright, so the entry point of every single request is this file, and then we go inside the bootstrap folder and then app.php, and then secondly, you know, this is the file that the request enters. Alright, Now here we have defined some routes, that these are already defined, and we can open the routes folder and we can see that web.php, this is the web.php route, and similarly console.php and console.php. So what I'm gonna do is like something like this, like how we have here the web.php file. I am going to create a file of my choice named like api.php, and I'm going to write every single API that I create for this project inside this file. So firstly I'm going to copy this entire thing and paste it here. Okay, I've already pasted it. So like now what I'm gonna do is I am going to go to like that app.php file again inside the bootstrap folder, and I'm going to define that route. Alright, it's going to be API, and again the syntax is going to be similar. I have to go to the directory and then the route, let me copy this one only, and instead of web.php it needs to be api.php. Alright, let me save this thing, and now I can go to my api.php file. So I can literally create any route in here that I want. So for example, I create a route that goes to like slash, which means like slash endpoint, and then it returns, you know, something like, let's say it just returns hello world, nothing else. Alright, so like let me save this thing, and now if I go to the browser, right, now the route that I had defined was slash API, and if I go to the slash route after that, you can see that this hello world is written over here. Alright, so this was the initial route, alright, that I defined in here. This is the initial route, and after that this will just come, you know, after the slash. So it could be literally anything, it just doesn't have to be a single slash. I can write like home in here, and if I save it and go back to like the browser and api/home, and I can press enter, and you can see the hello world here as well. So this is the very basic concept of like creating a very basic API like slash something, and then calling that API like get API from the browser, and it will return exactly what you want. Alright, so now what we are going to do and what this project is going to be about is we are going to be creating a set of different endpoints related to user management. Like we'll be fetching a list of users, and then we'll fetching a single user by ID. We are also going to implement the authentication routes like login and register and logout, like that. So we'll have like a proper auth project, you know, kind of a basic project implemented. So this would be like really helpful for you to understand the concepts of API development as well as the Laravel authentication as well. Alright, now the next thing I'm gonna go ahead with is the database setup. So you guys can open this environment file on the root level of your project and see that by default the database connection is SQLite. Now I want to go ahead with MySQL, and for that first thing you need to do is you need to you know, run your MySQL server. And you can see that in my case inside the XAMPP server you need to turn on the MySQL, and when that is done, then what you have to do is you have to change this SQLite to MySQL, and then you can uncomment, you know, all of these values. Now if you have a database password, then you can fill in here, otherwise you cannot. That depends upon what your configuration is. Like currently I don't have any, so I'm just going to keep it like that. And I'm going to save this file. Now what's going to happen is, like, you go to your browser and then you open just the localhost, nothing else, no like port after that. Let me just go to the localhost, and here you can see you will get the option for phpMyAdmin. You click on that and you see that you can, these are the database that have been like already been created and been worked upon earlier. So what I'm gonna do is, what you need to do is go back to the code, and here, like, by default the database name is Laravel, but I don't want the database name to be Laravel, so I want to change it to like something like, what we have in here, like, let me name it Laravel auth, because like that is also similar to what is the name of our project as well. Alright, so let me save this file. Now what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna open up the terminal, close the server for a moment, and now what I need to do, since I've changed something in the environment file and I've changed the name of the database, so I need to run the migrations to reflect that database structure into my MySQL phpMyAdmin. So what I need to do is, the name of the command is php artisan migrate, press enter, and it says that the database name Laravel auth does not exist because I just named it in the environment file. So it says, would you like to create it? So I'm gonna go ahead with yes, and now if I run the server again and I go to like browser and I refresh phpMyAdmin, so you can see here inside the Laravel, this Laravel auth database has already been created. Now all of these tables were already predefined in how the project structure is. Like if we open the users table, currently it does not have anything, but it has these specific defined columns which already comes with the project by default. So this is the this is the project we're going to be this is the database we'll be working with for this project, and now the setup of the database is done as well. Alright, so we are just going to go ahead with API development. Now I'm going to start with creating our first API, and that API is going to be a post route to create an entry in users table. So the name of that route would be something like create user. So it will actually create a new user, and the route needs to be a post route. Alright, now the first thing we'll do is that we'll create a controller. The controllers are basically of the files where the actual logic implementation of an API call would go. So we do not write the logic directly inside in the route file, so we have to create a separate controller functions for that. So basically I'm going to pull up my terminal and I am going to run a command saying like php artisan make controller. Alright, and now I need to define that what the name of my controller file needs to be. So this controller needs to handle the logic related to user, so I'm gonna name it a user controller, but also at the same time I want to create a directory named API and I want to put that file inside that directory, so I'm just going to call it user controller, something like that, and I'm going to press enter. So now you can clearly see at the top that it has already created the controller inside like the app folder, and you go inside the app folder, then http, then now it has created a folder named API, and you open it and you would see your user controller inside it. Alright, so now the first thing I'm gonna do is like create a function named create user. So public function create user. Alright, so what is going to take, it's going to take the request, and we need to import the request also from HTTP, and like this. And now here we'll write the actual logic to create the user. Alright, but firstly in my route file I need to remove this function, and what I need to do is I need to create an array and call like user controller here, and I need to import the user controller and the class, and now I need to write the name of the method which I want to be called when this API is called. Alright, so then the name of that function is create user. So I'm just going to save this. So the route configuration is already done, and now I need to go inside the user controller and this create user function to actually write the logic to create a new user. So I'm going to start with importing the user model. Now user model is already there, we don't need to like create it, so it comes automatically when we initiate the project, and it's already there. So it has these values like name, email, password, it has password and remember token, and all of these details. Now what we are going to do is alright, so I'm going to go to the user controller, and here I'm going to start writing the logic. So as I said that firstly we need to import like the user model, so I need to create a variable, let me like name it user, and then I need to import the user model, right? And it is inside the app folder and models, so I've imported my user model, and then I need to like call the create method inside it, and I need to create this create method will actually create a new user. Now this user needs to have a name. Alright, and now this name we are going to take this name from the request parameters, and I expect that the request should have a name property. That's what I want. Then I want email. Then again I need to look into the request. I want this request to have an email property as well. Now the last thing is password. This is the third thing I need in the request body to create a new user, and I am going to access it again through request and password. Alright, now this would be enough to create a new user, but one thing we need to make sure of is that we can never ever store password directly like how they are. So we cannot store the passwords directly as the strings. We need to encrypt those passwords. So for that we have a library, and we have the function named bycrypt. So I'm just going to call that function, alright, and wrap this whatever the value of the password is with that function, and from where I'm going to import this bycrypt. So basically it's like we don't need to import it, this comes by default, so I can use this method anywhere inside the Laravel project. So it will basically like automatically encrypt the password for us, and now we can like directly, we don't need to directly store the password, and this will, like, these 4 lines of code will actually create a new entry in users table. Now if the users is created, then like we are 100% sure that that user always will have an auto assigned ID. Alright, so that would be our check to verify whether a new entry has been created in the users table or not. So I'm going to run like an if check, that if user has an ID, like only I feel that user entry is created when user have an auto assigned ID. If user has an ID, then I'm going to create a variable named result. Okay, and this result is going to have a status. What I'm going to do, like status true or status success, anything like that. And then I'm going to send like a message, and this message is going to be like user created successfully. Okay, but now this needs to be arrow, and if any data I want to pass, so data is actually going to be that user. So I'm just directly going to pass that user to in the response. And one more thing I want to store is like a response code. Okay, so it's always a good idea to send a response code with the response. So currently like user has been created, technically it should be 201, but 200 is also fine, it comes under success status. Now what if the things doesn't go like as per we want them to? So like if the user entry does not get created, so we are just going to send the status as false, and then like a message of like something went wrong, and in data we are just going to send null value, and the response code needs to be 400. Now after that we are just going to return this response. So I'm just going to return response function, and then inside it like we will use the JSON function, and we will pass the result, and the second thing we will pass is the response code. Alright, that is it. Now oh sorry, it needs to be result. Okay, now like we have created this very basic, very simple function to create a new user, but we also have to keep it in mind that we always need to wrap our controller functions with try catch block, because if something fails or anything happens which doesn't go as expected, then we should know that what exactly went wrong, and we should be able to catch that exception. So in the catch block I am going to like use exception, and one second. So basically this exception, I'm going to take the variable named as like e, and now I need to return a specific response in this case as well if we run into a problem and our code goes to catch block. Alright, so in this situation I'm just going to copy this part, and now here the status can be false, the message can be API failed, or anything which we want. And now the data can be null, but we can send one extra property saying like error, and so that the user could know that what exactly went wrong. So this error variable that I extracted I can just extract the error message from this variable, and this would be this has a function named get message. You can also see that, and this would be enough. Now I am just going to copy this part where we return the response back. So I need to return the result in the response code back, and maybe instead of 400 it could be 500. Okay, and let me refresh this, and I think we have perfectly created a very simple function to create a new user. Okay, now I'm going to open up my terminal and again run the server, which is php artisan serve, press enter. Now the APIs are again running on port 8000. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Postman in order to test my APIs instead of browser, because we cannot test the post APIs directly on browser. So I've opened up my Postman that I have. So I'm going to create a new collection, and I'm going to name it Laravel auth. Okay, now I'm going to create a new request inside this. I'm just going to add the request. Now we know that the request we just created was a post request, and it's going to be this URL because it is on 8000, and /API is the route, and after that we have added the route create user. So that part we know already. Now basically in the body, something like form data, we need to send all of those values which that function needs. So firstly it needs a name. So let's say I'm going to name John, and then we have email. So it could be john@email.com, and then it could be password, and the password could be test@1234. Alright, so I think now I've filled everything what I needed to, and I'm going to send it, and you can see that it is a success response saying that user has been created successfully. Okay, now in this scenario we have sent everything perfectly, but what if user does not send the details properly? Let's say if user does not send password or email and try to hit the create user endpoint, now what's gonna happen? So it's actually, it broke the API and it went into catch block where we are getting this API failed and this message. So I think before going into the user creation part, we need to validate our request parameters properly. So for that we can also validate things before actually going into the database manipulation. So we are going to go do that next. So I'm going to open up the user controller, and before creating the user I'm actually going to validate whether this request has all the required parameters that I need or not. Otherwise we are going to throw an error response. Okay, so in order to validate all the properties inside the request, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable named validator. Okay, then I'm going to import the validator, import it on the top. So we need to import the validator from use and illuminate then support, then facades, then validator. So from here we need to import our validator, and after we have done importing it, we need to call this class, and inside this we need to use the make method, and we need to pass the request variable inside it, and make sure to pass the all properties inside it. And as the second argument, we need to define our different sorts of validators. So first one is the name validator. So first thing we want is the name needs to be required. Okay, the name is required now, and it needs to be a string. Okay, these are the two things. Second, the email. Okay, the email, firstly email needs to be required, of course. Then email needs to be a string, and then it needs to be unique. Email needs to be unique. In which table? Then after the colon we need to write the name of the table, which is users in our case. And the last one is password. So password is also required, so we need to write required, and it needs to be minimum of 4 characters. So we won't accept the password which is less than 4 characters. Alright, now we have created this variable, so we will check for a condition that if this validator fails. So if this validator fails, so it has the function fails. Alright, so in this scenario we won't go ahead of it, we'll just throw the error response. So status false, and message message could be validation failed. Alright, and here I want to send the specific message so that user would know that this exactly went wrong. So I need to go inside validator variable, and inside this we have a function named errors. So it will list all the errors, that what has happened and what was wrong with our request parameters, and then basically I'm going to return that response then and there. Alright, now after this I think we are all good to test this validation. Now I have saved it, and I'm going to test this validation once on the Postman. Now I'm going to test that validation on the Postman. I have saved my changes. Now the first thing is that the name is required, right? So if I don't send the name and send the request, then alright, it's not sending that exact thing back. Firstly, it says cannot use validator as validator because the name is already in use. So let me open and see what's going on. Okay, so let me just remove this one and go back to Postman and send the request again. Alright, so now it says the name field is required. So this is coming from the validator that we have added just now. So I'm just going to add it back again. And the second validator is that email needs to be unique, right? So let me, when I send it, it says that the email has already taken because you know, this email, we have already have an account with this email. Alright, now the third validator is password is required, and it needs to be more than 4 characters. So let's say if I send just 2 characters and try to hit the send button, it says the password field must be at least 4 characters. So I think our validation is on point and working absolutely fine, so we don't need to worry about it much anymore. And I think I've created another user which has the email john1@email.com. So now our database should have 2 users, and if I open the database and try to refresh it, so you can see that these are the 2 users that we have just created are already there inside the users table, which have the ID, which have the name, which have the email address, the password which is encrypted and created and then updated at timestamps. Okay, Now the next API we are going to be creating is going to be to fetch all the list of users that we have created. So now as we are going to fetch the list of users, this route is going to be a get route. So the route and then the get method. Now the name of the route could be like get users, and again we need to go inside the user controller class, and the name of the method can be get users. Alright, this sounds good. Let me save this, and now I'm going to go to my user controller again, and here I'm going to create another method named get users, as we have defined in our route file, and public function get users. We don't need any request parameters in here, so I won't define that. Now I'll make sure that I will put every logic of my code inside try block, and the catch block, which will catch the exception E. And what I'm going to do is I'm just directly going to copy the exception part from the above function so that we don't have to rewrite that. Alright, okay, so in the try block we basically need a list of users which are already there in the table. So what I'm going to do is define a variable named users, and we need to go inside the user module, and inside the user module I need to fetch all entries. So I need to use this method which is user module and all method inside it. Now again I will create the same response format, and again I will copy it from the above method. Now the response format is going to be something like that. It will have a result with status true, message. So message could be a little different in this case, and what I want is the message needs to be count, and this will tell us the exact number of users that we have. So we need like the count of users, so we just need to pass the users directly inside it, and then I will just write like users fetched. Like if there are 2 users, then it would say like 2 users fetched, and inside the data I need to send the list of users that we have extracted here. So this was like very simple, and now I will just directly return the response here, response, and it needs to be in the JSON format, and I need to send my result and the response code. Okay, let me save this, and now we will test it in the Postman. Now I will create a new request. So firstly I want to name this request something else. So this could be like create user request, and then I'm going to create a new request. Okay, add request, and this needs to be a get endpoint. That is very clear. We need to fetch list of all users. So this was the route earlier, but this one needs to be like get users, and I don't think we need to send anything else because we just need to fetch the list of all users from the database. I'm going to hit send, and you can see that we had created total 2 users and which are successfully fetched, and we can see all the information related to that: ID, name, email, and date timestamps. So this was like really simple and quick. Now the next thing we are going to do is going to be basically we will create a new API to get a single user by ID. So let's say for example I know the ID of John, and I want whatever the user with the ID 1. So this again will be a get route, but this time like we will be fetching a single user by the ID we have provided in the URL. Alright, so let's start with that. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my API route file again, and here only I will create another route, and again it's going to be a get route. The URL, the endpoint for this route needs to be get user, because we are trying to get a single user, and after that there needs to be a dynamic parameter in the route, and that would be the ID of that user that we need in the URL itself. Again, we need to get inside the user controller class, and the name of the method could be like get user. Okay, so let me save it and go to user controller again. Now here I am basically going to create another method, so let me like copy this one only, and we'll make small changes to this one to have our own method. So this name of this method needs to be get user. Now since we know that we need a dynamic ID with this method, so I'm just going to extract that dynamic ID in here. So this is the ID that we need in order to fetch that particular user from the database. Now you know, the technique is going to be same, but instead of all method we need to have the find method in here. Okay, so we need to use the find method, and if we need to find by ID, so that ID is going to be like we need to pass that ID directly down to this function, and there is a possibility that we might not get a user. For example, if we pass a wrong ID, so that time as well we want to validate that. So like we'll make a check that if we do not find any user, if there is no user, then we want to return a response then and there. So it's going to be like we will be returning the response, which is going to be again in JSON format. Wait, this needs to be like this, and now again the same thing, you know, the status is going to be false because this is an error. The message is going to be user not found, and at last I think as a second argument I can pass the status code, which is 404, which is the one for like not found. Alright, now this is what we're going to return when we do not found any user. But in case when we did find a user, then the status needs to be true, and here the message we can change to like user fetched successfully. Okay, something like that. And in data I need to pass that user directly you know, in the response code could be 200, and we'll just directly return that response, and the exception block could be exactly the same. So let me format and save this function. Now I can go back to the Postman again. So let me rename this request to fetch users, like to fetch all the users, but now I will add a new request, and let me rename it to fetch user, like a single user. This needs to be a get request, that is inevitable, but here now it needs to be get user instead of users, and here I need to pass the ID of the user. Now we have seen from the response earlier that we had two users with ID 1 and 2, so I'll just pass like 1 like this, and when I send the request it says user not found. Okay, let me go to like fetch users, and we see that we have a user with ID 1. Okay, let me go back to code and see what's going on. Okay, I think I have added the reverse condition. So this if block needs to be like if no user, if they do not find a user. So this needs to be like negation of this, and I think and now everything seems to be fine. Let me open the postman again and go to the fetch users. So now we need the user with id 1. Let me send the request, and you guys can see that the user has been fetched successfully. The name is John and all the details that we already knew. But now if I send something like if I send an id which do not exist in the database, like 3, and I send it, so it's gonna send me user not found, which is exactly what we wanted. So this works as expected. So the next API we'll be creating would be to update a single user. Let's say I want to change the detail of a particular user, name, email, or anything like that. So that would be the next API. So I suppose that API needs to be a put request because we are editing something. So route, and we will use the put request, and the URL could be update user. Okay, that could be the URL, and we also need the ID of the user which we want to update, because without it we wouldn't know that which user we want to update. And again we can go to the user controller class, and the name of the method could be update user. Okay, so I think the route is ready. Now we need to go to the user controller, and we need to start writing the code for updating the user. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this entire function, which is this create user, and I feel that the update user would be like a little similar to that, so maybe it would be a good idea to just start with that. So the name of the function needs to be update user first of all, so I'll just change the name of the function. Now there are two things. So first thing, we have to extract the request because we need to get the body parameters from that, but also at the same time we want to have the ID of that user which we have sent in the URL to know that which user we want to update. Okay, now the first condition I want to add here is we need to check whether there is a user which exists in the database with this ID or not, because if we have no user with this ID, then there is no point going forward and we have to return from there itself. So I will just copy this logic from here. And so what I'm going to do is I have to begin with I think update user. I need to have the u small, and what I need to do now, firstly I will try to find a user with that ID, and if we do not get a user, then I'll just throw like user not found, which was exactly what we did earlier. Now the next thing is we need to validate request as well. We need to validate whether we are sending proper parameters or not. So we need a name that is required and needs to be a string, and then we also need an email which is required, which needs to be a string, which needs to be unique or write in users. But we can also do one thing. We can do because one thing is that when we are editing, right, so this is the ID of that user, but if we do not want to change the email, if we want to keep it as it is and we only want to update the name, in that scenario this check would fail because that email won't be unique, because an entry in the database would already exist with that email. So to avoid that, what we need to do is inside the users table, inside email, the email column, and what we need to do here, I just need to do like the dot and that ID. I need to mention that ID. So what it will do, it will exclude the email of this particular ID in the table and check for all the other email IDs. And the next thing is password. So we do not need this check because we cannot update the password, so we can only update name or email, not anything else. So I think that now this looks good. Now again, if validation fails, I have to throw the same thing, that validation has failed and we need to send the proper data in order to update the user. So this looks good, but now what I need to do, that this user that I had extracted earlier with that ID, what I need to do is I need to update the properties of this user. I need to update the email of this user and I need to update the name of this user. So what I'll do is I'll say user dot name should be request name. All right, so which means I have to update the name of the user to what we have sent in the request, and similarly it goes for the email. So I need to update the email of the user to what we have sent in the request. So now this part is not required because we don't want to create a new user, but what we need to do is we need to save that changes that we have just done. So we have to call the save method on the user variable. Now I think I do not need to check for whether we have an ID or not, because it will definitely have an ID if we have a user in the database, so we don't need to worry about that. So I can just remove this check and I can remove this else condition as well. But now like the status could be true here and the message could be user updated successfully, and I need to send it in the response. So let me save this thing and let me just format it and save it. All right, now what I can do, I can check this in the Postman. So let me open the Postman and let me add a new request, and I'm going to name this request as update user. Okay, now it needs to be a put request, we are already aware of that, and it will be API slash update user, and we also need to send the ID of the user. So let's say I will pass the ID as 2. Now I need to send something in the body for it to know that what I want to change. So let's say I want to change the name to let's say Max, and I want to change the email to max@gmail.com. Alright, so let me send the request. Okay, it seems that something is not working. Not found. Update user with ID 2 not found. Let me see what's going on. So we have a update user method with the ID. Alright, okay, I think I have an extra dollar sign in here which is not required. So let me save it now, and let's go to the Postman again and try to send. And it says the name field is required and the email field is required. I don't know why it's not taking the form data. Okay, let's try one thing. Instead of this, let's send it in the raw, and here I will send the name as Max and the email as max@gmail.com. Alright, and now I'm gonna hit the send, and you guys can see that the entry has been updated successfully, and now the user with ID 2 has the name Max and email has also been updated. So let me fetch all the users one more time again, and you can see that we have 2 users, one with the name John and one with the name Max. So I think our update user API is working absolutely fine, so that's great. Now we are going to move on to the next API, which is going to be to delete a user. Okay, so that's not going to be very tricky. So one thing to remember is that it needs to be a delete request. So it needs to be a delete request, and the route could be delete user, and we also need ID here as well, because we need to know that what is the user that we want to delete. And again we need to go to user controller class, and the name of the method could be delete user. All right, now I'm gonna go to the user controller again, and I'm going to copy this method only, which is this public get user, and I will try to alter this method only to get my delete user. Now first thing, I need an ID in the function. That is very clear, so I'm going to update the name of the function to delete user. It will accept an ID, and we try to find the user with that ID. Alright, and if we do not get a user, then we'll just say that user not found. Otherwise if we do get a user, then what we need to do is we need to call the delete method on that user. So this is very simple. We have called a delete method on that user, and we need to send the status as true, and message could be like user deleted successfully. And I don't think we need to send any data, so data could be like null for the moment. And let me save this. So I think this was like really quick, and deleting user doesn't take much of an effort to build. So now I'm going to open the Postman again, and I'm going to add a new request, which is going to be delete user, and again it needs to be delete type of call, and I'm going to change the URL to delete user, but I need to add the ID of the user that I want to delete. Let's say we have 2 users, and I want to delete the user with ID 2, and let me send the request, and it says user has been deleted successfully, which we wanted. Now if I try to delete the user with the ID 2 again, it will say user not found, because there is no user with that ID now in the database. So if I try to fetch the list of users again, so earlier we had 2, now we only have 1 user, which we have created in the beginning, so which means that our delete user request is working perfectly fine. Okay, so I think if I go to fetch users, and we see the email is john@email.com, not gmail.com, so that is the issue here, and I need to change it to email.com. so if I change it to email.com and try to hit the login, then we can see we are getting the actual login response. So this is the token that I've extracted from this API response, and all of the user details are also coming exactly how we want. So this looks perfectly fine, and let me go to the code again, and you guys can see that if we get the proper details and log the user in, then we are sending the success response. But we also need to send the response in case when the credentials are not valid. So in that scenario, I'm just going to return the response like this, where the status is false, messages and valid credentials, and the response code is 401. So I think this makes perfect sense. And let me say, when this happens a lot of times, that user do not fill in proper details, and because of which the API fails, like the mistake we did earlier. So for example, if it still would be gmail.com, and if I send the response, I don't know, right now I feel it does not send proper response for some reason, and I think I know the reason behind it, and let me investigate a little bit more. So what I think is that inside the app.php, where we have this middle where we are getting the exceptions, we are actually doing nothing. So here we need to do something in order to have the proper responses for authentication module as well. So here what we need to do is let me see. So like if we get exceptions, like if we get exceptions vendor function and authentication exception, let's say with a variable named e, and it will also give you the request. Okay, and request. All right, now if we have like request is like, if the request is like an API request like this, has star or something like that, then what we need to do is we need to return the response JSON message. One second. The message needs to be what we're getting from the error get message, and that would be the message, and the request code can be for 1, exactly how we sent. So I think that looks pretty much okay to me. So I have saved this, and let me go to the Postman again and try to hit the login API, and for some reason it still doesn't send me you know, the response that I want for some reason. Okay, it says 200 response. Oh, I think it's my mistake that I'm not even returning this result, this invalid credentials result at all. So we need to return this response as well to see it in the Postman. So alright, so now I'm sending the response, and now if I go to the login route and try to hit it, so now I'm actually getting the response that I wanted, like invalid credentials, so that user could know that either email or password is wrong, and when they correct that part like this, when they send it, then they are logged in successfully. Alright, now what I want to do is, like, I want to rename this create user call to like register, because you know, create user is actually basically registering a new user. But with this register call, now I also want to return an API like auth token, so that you know, user can use that auth token in order to validate a lot of API calls. So basically we are going to use the same method. We are not going to change the endpoint or anything, but with this we are going to return a token. You know, that's what we are going to do. So basically we don't need to change anything much in this. So basically after we have created the user, we already have this user. So what we need to do is we need to send the token back. So it needs to be like token, and it will be equal to the user that we already have created, and inside that we have the method create token, and inside create token we need to pass the string as passport token. Alright, and then we need to access the property, which is access token. Alright, so this is how we are going to get our token. Now basically I have to save this file, and go back to the registered method again, and I'm going to create another user named like Sarah, and its Gmail again can be sarah@gmail.com. so basically with this, now I'm expecting a token, and if I send this, so basically I've got my authentication token, which is this one, and a new user has already been created in the database. I can fetch all the users and see that this user is now created in the database and now existing in our database. Alright, so this was all about logging in and registering authentication. Now the next thing which comes is the authorization, which is again the most important part, that I want to restrict this route to only to the people who are logged in. Like, I do not want anyone to just come and see the list of users in my database. So I only want people who have an account, who are logged in, to view the list of users. Alright, so this route I want to restrict. Okay, so I want to restrict this route. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do basically is I am going to go to my API routes file. So let me open my routes file, which is this one. So now I need to figure out that which are the routes I want to restrict. So basically here I see two routes in which we are fetching the data in the database directly, which is get users and get user by ID. So both of these routes I want to restrict, and I only want those people to access these routes, these APIs only when they are authenticated and they have that access token. So in order to do that, what we are going to do, we are going to group these two API calls in like a middleware, which will check whether these API requests have that authentication token or not, and only if the request have the authentication token, it will let the user access the data in the database. Alright, so what we are going to do is we are going to write route, and inside that middleware. Okay, and which middleware we are going to use is we are going to use auth middleware, auth API middleware, and we are going to create a group because we want like more than one APIs to have the same middleware. And I will create a function, and now I am going to put both of these routes inside that group. Alright, so this was like very easy. We didn't have to do much in it. We just had to put you know, these two API calls inside this auth middleware. So now it will make sure that we can only access the users inside the database only when we have the proper access token available. Now I am going to go to Postman again. Alright, I'm going to try to fetch the users. Alright, so now you can clearly see that, you know, we have an error, and to read what is this error we have to go down, you know, I don't know. Okay, I can go to the preview, and it says that route login not found, and whatever this issue is, this is only because you know, we do not have proper access token enabled. So this is coming from the middleware, which is auth API middleware. So like this is very clear from here that why this error is coming, because we do not have proper access token in here. Alright, so how we will send the access token? So what we are going to do, we're going to go inside the login, firstly try to log a user in. So we are like, we have called the login API, and I'm going to copy this access token because this is something that we need in order to fetch the users now. And I'm going to go inside the authorization tab, and I have to select the bearer token. Okay, I have to select the bearer token, and now I have to, like, you know, paste that bearer token in here. So we have to make sure that you paste it carefully, so that the entire token is getting up, because this is a really long token. And let me send the request now, and I can see that I'm able to see all the users only because I'm sending the token with the request authorization. Now we can check the same thing with fetch user as well. So let me try to do that anonymously, and it's not going to happen. It will again throw an error, something like that, with 500 internal server error saying route login not defined, because it is trying to like log the user in before actually making this API call. So what we are going to do is again go to authorization, go to bearer token, and let me paste that token again, and let me try to make the call again, and we can see that I'm totally able to fetch the user by ID after adding the proper authorization token. So that was like all about authorization, and by this we are coming to an end of this project. So we have like created a proper CRUD operation, we have created an entry, we have deleted it, edited it, and then we have created view routes, we have fetched the lists, we have fetched the list by ID, and on the top of that we have also implemented Laravel authentication using passport with login and register. We have also seen how do we use access tokens, as well as how do we restrict the routes so that only authenticated members can access those routes. So we have covered a lot in this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. So please let me know in the comment section if there's any other specific topic that you guys want my content to be focused on. And thank you so much for watching this video.